What happens when a working man helping his mama becomes a target for ruthless bikers in a dark parking lot? You won't believe how a single moment of quiet courage turns the tables in the most unexpected way. Before we begin the story, write in the comments where you are watching us from. They say kindness costs nothing, but that's easy to say when you're not standing in a grocery line after a 12-hour shift with your back screaming for mercy and a wallet thinner than the paper bags they charge you a quarter for. I had one goal that evening. Grab Mama's medicine, pick up some fruit, and get home before her knees stiffened up again. Simple, right? I guess the universe had other plans when I stopped to help that old white lady by the sliding doors. She was struggling, wrestling with a busted cart that wanted to roll into traffic, and folks were too busy pretending not to see her. So I stepped up, steadied her cart, and got a quick, grateful smile before she shuffled off. Funny how doing the right thing puts a target on your back sometimes. As I stepped into that evening air, bags in hand, the parking lot was humming with car doors, engines, and the heavy bass of a black SUV parked crooked across two spaces. That's where they were. 3 men in leather vests with patches I didn't bother reading, the type who carry the smell of cheap beer and even cheaper talk like it's their cologne. One of them locked eyes with me, crushed his soda can, and tossed it right at my feet. Oh, so that's how it's gonna be tonight. I didn't say a word, just bent down and picked it up, dropping it into the trash nearby. I heard them laugh. You know that laugh, the one that says they've decided you're their entertainment for the evening. "Hey man, you cleaning up for us now?" one of them called out, stepping away from the SUV with the kind of slow walk people use when they think the world belongs to them. I kept walking, ignoring them, aiming for my car parked under a flickering light that couldn't decide if it wanted to shine or die out. My heart was already picking up, that old familiar drum reminding me of every sideways glance I've ever ignored, every name I've ever swallowed because sometimes staying alive means letting fools think they've won. Then came the second guy, younger, built like he wanted everyone to know he worked out, tossing a cigarette butt that bounced off my shoe. I stopped, took a breath, but I didn't move. My mama raised me to stand tall, even if I had to stand alone. "What, you too good to talk, man?" he said, stepping closer, smirking like he was waiting for me to flinch. Another step. Another laugh. The third man leaned against the SUV, watching, arms crossed like he was at a show. My hands tightened on the grocery bags. One of them tore, and an apple rolled out, spinning across the cracked pavement. I watched that apple roll, red against gray, and felt something sharp rise in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was that tired old anger, the one that shows up when you realize folks like them don't see you as a man, just as something they can poke at because they're bored and you're there. I reached down, picked up the apple, and stood back up, looking the first man dead in the eye. His smile twitched. "Man, you got something to say, or you just gonna stand there like a statue?" he snapped, stepping closer, close enough I could see the sweat on his forehead under the lights. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Not because I was scared, but because I was tired. Tired of being the bigger person, tired of swallowing it down, tired of folks thinking they could test me just because I was in their line of sight. And that's when the third man, the quiet one, pushed off the SUV and circled around, blocking the way to my car. His boots scraped the concrete as he crossed his arms again, tilting his head, eyes cold. They thought they had me surrounded. They thought they were about to teach me some kind of lesson. I stood there holding that apple, feeling the weight of every eye that was suddenly pretending not to see us. That's the part that burns the most, you know? The way people look away when you need them to see you the most. And right there, under that flickering light, I realized that sometimes the world doesn't give you a choice about when you have to stand your ground, even if you're holding a grocery bag in one hand and a busted apple in the other. What happened next changed everything. You do not want to miss how this unfolds. They say the eyes are windows to the soul, but let me tell you, those men had shutters pulled tight. They weren't looking at me like a person standing under that flickering light with Mama's groceries in hand. They were looking at me like a target, something to test, something to entertain themselves with while the world kept spinning and folks kept pretending they didn't see a thing. I shifted the bag in my hand, feeling the weight of that apple, bruised but whole, kind of like I felt most days. The first man, with a smirk that looked like it had been practiced in the mirror, leaned in, so close I could smell that cheap cologne folks buy when they want to feel important. "Look at you, acting all calm," he said, tilting his head. "You think you better than us?" Now, here's the thing. I've spent enough years on this earth to know when a man's looking for trouble and when he's looking for a fight. The first one was the talker, the one who liked to puff himself up. The second was the muscle, still bouncing on his feet like he wanted me to make a move so he could feel like a hero in his own story. And the third, the quiet one, was the watcher. Arms folded, eyes sharp, standing by the SUV like he was waiting for the punchline to a joke only he found funny. I didn't say a word. Not because I was afraid, but because sometimes silence is the loudest thing you can give a man. But silence don't always keep the peace. "Hey!" The second one, the muscle, slapped the apple out of my hand, sending it skidding across the pavement, bouncing off the curb before rolling into the shadows. "I'm talking to you." I felt that slap like a spark in my chest, but I kept my face calm. Mama always said, "Don't let them see you sweat." But let me tell you, that advice gets heavier the older you get. "Man, he thinks he's too good to talk to us," the first one said, laughing, looking back at the quiet one for approval. I turned, slow, careful, and met his eyes. "I don't want trouble," I said, voice steady. He laughed again, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the kind that makes your skin crawl, the kind folks use when they think they've got the upper hand. "Trouble?" he echoed. "Man, you standing here is trouble." And that's when the quiet one moved. He stepped forward, slow, the crunch of gravel under his boots sharp in the air. His eyes flicked to the bag in my hand, to the blood on my knuckles where the apple had scraped me, then back to my face. "You know what your problem is?" he said, voice low, calm like the rumble before a storm. "You think you can walk through here and keep your head high." I felt something tighten in my chest, that familiar ache that comes when you realize no matter how many hours you work, no matter how many times you help someone up those steps, some folks will always see you as a challenge just for standing tall. The first man stepped in again, shoving me, hard enough to rock me back. The grocery bag tore, sending oranges bouncing, bottles of medicine rattling across the pavement. I heard one crack, the sound sharp in the night. That was Mama's medicine. I looked down at the mess, the pills rolling into the gutter, the oranges bruising on the concrete, and I felt that anger rise, bitter in my mouth, thick in my throat. "Oh, what, you gonna cry now?" the muscle said, stepping close, his breath hot and sharp. I looked up, meeting his eyes, steady, letting him see that I wasn't about to break. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from holding back everything I wanted to say, everything I wanted to do. "Pick it up," the quiet one ordered, pointing at the spilled groceries like I was a child he was scolding. I knelt, slow, picking up an orange, a bottle of pills with a cracked lid, slipping them back into the torn bag. They circled around me, blocking out the light, their shadows falling over me like a cage. And I realized, right there on that cracked pavement, that sometimes the world don't give you the luxury of peace, no matter how much you want it. Sometimes, trouble finds you, no matter how many times you turn the other cheek. But I also knew something else. You can only push a man so far before something inside him decides enough is enough. And while I was kneeling there, gathering up those bruised oranges, I felt that something inside me, shifting, quiet but certain. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay tuned to see how the hero stood his ground when it mattered most. You ever notice how quiet the world gets right before something changes? It was quiet as I knelt there, picking up bruised oranges, cracked pill bottles rattling in a torn grocery bag while 3 men stood over me, shadows long under that twitching parking lot light. Quiet. But inside me, it was like thunder rolling. "Come on, man, hurry up!" the first one barked, tapping his foot like I was keeping him from something important. His laugh, sharp and empty, echoed off the parked cars. I stood up slow, groceries in hand, feeling the rip in the plastic stretching under the weight. I caught my reflection in the car window, tired eyes, squared shoulders, hands shaking just a little. I saw a man who had spent his life trying to do right, trying to keep his head down when it was safer, trying to live with dignity in a world that liked to test that dignity for sport. "You done?" the muscle asked, cracking his knuckles, stepping so close I could see the veins on his neck pulsing. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, calm, breathing slow, letting the night settle around me. Because there comes a point when fear steps aside and leaves room for something else, resolve. That's when it happened. A car pulled up, headlights sweeping across the lot like a lighthouse beam, catching the 3 of them in stark white light. The driver stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket with a clean badge glinting under the lamp. Another man stepped out from the passenger side, arms crossed, eyes cold. They didn't say a word at first, just walked over, boots clicking on the pavement. The quiet one from the trio shifted, folding his arms tighter, trying to hold on to whatever power he thought he had. "Is there a problem here?" the man with the badge asked, voice calm, controlled, like someone used to folks listening when he talked. The muscle started to speak, but the man with the badge held up a hand, stopping him cold. His eyes turned to me, softening just enough to let me know he saw me, really saw me. "You all right, sir?" he asked. That "sir" hit different, let me tell you. It was like a reminder that I was a man, no matter what these 3 tried to make me feel like. "I'm fine," I said, though my hands were still trembling. "You sure?" he pressed, glancing at the torn bag, the spilled groceries, the cut on my hand. I nodded, but inside, something was still boiling, because fine wasn't the word for what I was feeling. The badge turned to the trio, his eyes sharp. "You fellas need to leave." The first one opened his mouth, ready to protest, but one look shut him up. The muscle looked like he wanted to argue, shifting from foot to foot, but he backed down when the second man stepped forward, slipping a hand into his jacket just enough to remind them they were out of time. The quiet one? He just stared at me, like he was trying to memorize my face, like he couldn't believe I was still standing there. Then he turned, muttering under his breath, and walked back to their SUV. The others followed, looking smaller now, the swagger gone as they climbed in and slammed the doors. The engine roared, tires squealing as they pulled out, leaving behind the smell of burnt rubber and cheap cologne. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. It was a silence filled with relief, with the sound of my own breath steadying, with the knowledge that I was still here, still standing. The man with the badge nodded at me. "Take care of yourself." "Thank you," I said, holding his gaze. He nodded again and turned back to his car, the lights flashing as they pulled away, leaving me alone on that parking lot with the groceries, the bruised fruit, and the cracked pill bottles. I stood there for a moment, letting the night wrap around me, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. Then I bent down, picking up what was left, placing each orange carefully into the bag, each pill bottle settled like it mattered, because it did. As I walked to my car, the light above finally flickered to life and stayed on, bright and steady, lighting my path as I opened the door and set the groceries on the seat. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing, remembering Mama's words. "Keep your head up, baby. Always." And I did, because that night didn't break me. It reminded me that dignity is not something you ask permission to keep. You claim it every day, in every small moment, even on a parking lot under a flickering light with bruised oranges in your hand. And when I pulled out of that lot, I didn't look back.